Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brittany Miller, and I'm very excited to be back for this week's episode of Connecting Live. Welcome for those just joining. We have a treat for you today. I'm so grateful you guys could hop on and join us. We have some new announcements. Just a reminder for Raising Special Kids updates. We do have our Summer School for Parents event tomorrow. It is a super fun and informative day of learning. It is virtual. It's not too late to register, so we will go ahead and put the link for that in the comments. Please check it out. We have a full day of trainings in English and Spanish. We also have something new this year. It's a virtual lunchroom where you can log on and connect with other parents and some of the Raising Special Kids staff. We also will be doing giveaways for those who register. So stay tuned to our Facebook page. I'll be on there and my colleague as well, posting the winners for those RSK swag gift bags that will be mailed out to you. And we really hope you can attend. It's a very fun event. And hopefully next year, crossing our fingers, we will be back in person for Summer School for Parents. So today we are going to be talking about a very important topic called vocational rehab. You know, many families that call into Raising Special Kids, they're looking for guidance to help their young adults and teenagers start thinking about employment in the future. And a lot of families have questions. And so we are very grateful that we have Betty Schoen from our Vocational Rehabilitation program here in Arizona as a special guest today to teach us about Voc Rehab, you know, how it works, how to access the program, you know, job coaching, all the ins and outs of it. And we are so thankful, Betty. Welcome. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and time with us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you. I'm going to give a little introduction, Betty, and then we'll go ahead and dive into some of the questions we get from families. So Betty Schoen has worked for DES, the Department of Economic Security, since 1986. She began as a temp and worked for 2 other administrations before joining the the Rehabilitation Services Administration Vocational Rehabilitation Program as a transition specialist. That's kind of a mouthful, but for short, vocational rehab for our families. And she is a regional transition specialist for Arizona. Betty first started working as a counselor with high school students with disabilities in 2000. And her favorite aspect of her job is providing resources to students, educators, and other transition partners, and helping our youth with disabilities prepare for meaningful careers. So welcome, Betty. We're really excited you could join us today.
Thank you.
So as you know, we've talked about, you know, we gathered some questions we often hear from parents and families in the community. And if you don't mind, we'll just go down the list and go back and forth and tackle these. So first, the first question that we hear a lot is, you know, what is vocational rehab, the vocational rehabilitation program? What does it do and how does it support individuals with disabilities?
Well, that's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked. So vocational rehabilitation, or VR as we typically call it, you know, we love our acronyms. It's an employment program. That's our bottom line, employment for people with any kind of disability. So it doesn't matter if it's a mental health issue, if it's cognitive issue, a developmental issue, could be a brain injury, could be a chronic disease. If you have a diagnosis and that diagnosis creates challenges to preparing for, getting, or keeping employment, you are potentially eligible for vocational rehabilitation services.
Okay. Thank you. And what types of services does it offer? How do they assist individuals with disabilities looking for employment?
Well, there are so many services that are provided by Voc Rehab. We start at the age of 14. Oh, okay. All of our services are based on the disability-related needs of that individual. So if you think about a 14-year-old, maybe with a significant developmental disability, who's never really had any exposure to work, and maybe never had the expectation that they will work, they're going to need a lot of services to give them that exposure, help them to identify their strengths, their preferences, the things they like to do, the skills that they have, the skills that they might need, to expose them to different kinds of jobs And so career exploration, work-based learning experiences, maybe counseling on post-secondary education or training. Those are all different kinds of services that we provide. And one of the services that we provide that a student between the ages of 14 and 22 with a disability does not even need to be our client to receive is that pre-employment transition services. Okay. So those services are meant to help youth kind of get their toe in the water, start thinking about work. What do I like? What do I want to do? How do I advocate for myself? Where might I go for training? So those are all really important things for our young people to understand and to start delving into.
Wonderful. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about that, when vocational rehab services can begin. So, I'm hearing that it can begin, as they're entering high school. Mm-hmm. Is that something you partner with the schools or would the family initiate that assistance? How does that work?
So a referral can come really from any source. We do have schools that we work with through an interagency agreement. There's 32 districts in the state. And for those specific districts, through their agreement with VR, they are able to provide enhanced transition services to students in their district during the school day by staff that are school employees. And the VR counselors go to the campuses, or in this case, they're virtual, but they go to the campuses and work individually with those students. But those schools have that special in to VR. Any other school can refer a student as long as the parent is aware that that's what's being done and they approve of that. And it could also be your DD support coordinator. Okay. It could be a behavioral health service counselor or professional, or maybe foster care. We don't really care where the referral comes from as long as the parent and the student know that the referral is being made and approved and they understand what's being offered.
Thank you. And so for an adult, since we've talked a little bit about, if a student gets that support early on, which obviously is very crucial and most helpful, but for individuals who are 18 and above and have never had vocational rehab support yet, do they need to initiate it as adults? Can their parents assist? What might that look like and what types of services could potentially start for them as adults?
Okay. So we've talked that the referral can come from anywhere.
Right.
And once the referral is made, and you can make that by calling the VR office that you wish to use, and they will take that referral information over the phone. After taking that referral information over the phone, they would send you or email you a list of documents that would be required in order for them to do the intake. And the intake is that meeting with the VR counselor where you meet, with the VR counselor. Right now it's all virtually. Sure. So you'd meet with them over Zoom or over Google Meets, and they'd ask questions about the disability and get the basic information that we need, from anybody about living condition and where you live and what school you go to and all that kind of stuff, or what your past work history might have been. Talk about your disability and how it impacts you in the employment arena. After the intake is done, if you need help with assessment, perhaps it's been 5 years or 6 years since you got out of high school and you don't have any current information. That is something that VR can help with.
Okay.
We can write off to your doctor and ask for your documents as long as you release that information to us, or we could do some new assessments. So the criteria you asked, did you ask about the criteria?
I was just going to lead into that, and we often get this question, Betty, from families. Obviously for the Department of Developmental Disabilities, there are eligibility criteria. SSI, Social Security, has criteria. And so families wonder, are there certain criteria to receive vocational rehabilitation assistance? And how does that work?
Okay, so we have 4 eligibility criteria. The individual has to have a documented disability, and that can be documented by a medical doctor. It can be documented by a school psychologist, such as in the case of a learning disability or an intellectual disability. It can be documented by a licensed psychological or psychiatric professional.
Right.
So those are where documentation can come from. And that disability has to create a barrier to employment. So I have disabilities that are mitigated with treatment. So I don't have a barrier to employment because I can work. Obviously, I'm doing it right now.
Right.
Even though if I stopped those mitigating treatments, that might impact my ability to be employed or stay employed. So you have to have that impact on employment, and the individual has to require our services to prepare for, obtain, or maintain employment. And when you're looking at youth, particularly youth maybe with significant disabilities, a lot of times it's that preparation for employment that is the hugest barrier for them. They really need that assistance to figure out what's a good match for me, vocationally or career-wise. How do I get prepared for that? Maybe college isn't going to be the right fit for them and training. So it's figuring out what they need to get prepared for employment, and then getting those services to help them prepare for employment so that we can then help them get, and perhaps even help them keep that job if they need ongoing supports to help them to maintain employment. Did that answer the question?
Yes, definitely. So correct me if I'm wrong. So they'd have to have a disability that impacts their ability to work. So their criteria doesn't depend on, okay, you qualify for Department of Developmental Disabilities or you have SSI. Completely separate, because we do get that questions a lot. So I'm glad that you clarified that. Thank you. If you don't mind, we did have a question from a parent, and I'll just summarize. So there is a mother who has a daughter that when she was in high school, to get support from vocational rehab, she was told that she had to show that she was employable. If a person has significant disabilities, is there a level of, okay, this person could potentially hold a job or not? Is there any sort of I don't want to say standard, that's the wrong word, but you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do. And this has been an evolving process for VR. Okay. I would say within the last 5 years, especially with the advent of Employment First.
Right.
We have had to change how we view youth in particular, and understand that when a youth with a significant disability comes to us, we can't just look at them and say, oh my God, they're not employable. Right. We have to have objective information to tell us that. And if that youth has never been exposed to employment and had the opportunity to experience employment, then they're not going to do a good job if we put them in some kind of initial assessment to determine that. We need to provide services first to help them with exposure to employment and help them start learning about what might their employment picture look like, what are going to be the kind of employment that they would best fit into, that would match their skills, their abilities, their interests. These are all very important things. So when we're just coming into acquaintance of a young person with a significant disability, we need to provide those services first to help them to learn about employment, get some experience with employment, figure out what they like to do before we try to determine can they or can they not. And I think there's been a big shift within our agency about how we go about doing that. So if your daughter went through the process for intake maybe even 4 years ago, the message might not have gotten out there strongly enough that we can't just say, oh gosh, this person looks like they might not be able to work. We're going to put them in a trial work experience, and if they don't do well in that, we'll say they're ineligible. We have to do more steps now. So I would say go back to VR. If you need help with that, please get my contact information.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for the parent that commented. Please call us at Raising Special Kids. We can connect you with Betty or the transition specialist in your area and get some additional support and hopefully help out your child get some employment services. So thank you for that. So let's keep going. Okay, so you kind of touched on this a little bit. So my daughter, she's in high school, she gets pre-employment services, some experiences in high school to kind of prep her and coach her. Now she's an adult. At this point, what happens with Voc Rehab? Do they step in and start looking for employers? How does that transition over and what does that look like?
Well, it depends on, is your daughter a VR client or not?
Well, yes. So say, I'm just using my child as an example. So say that the child, any kiddo in Arizona that receives services in high school, now they're an adult and ready to enter the workforce. What happens next?
Well, it just depends on what they want to do. What is their career goal?
Okay.
Because the career goal is going to determine the next steps after high school.
Okay.
Perhaps they're a student in high school and they've been involved in career and technical education through one of the joint technical education districts. The one I'm probably the most familiar with is here in the Valley. It might be West MEC or it might be East Valley Institute of Technology.
Right.
And if that young person completed that 2-year training for, say, auto body technician,
okay,
and they've had sufficient work experience to be ready for entry level work, then maybe it is that we help them find that first job.
Okay.
Or maybe they need a little more experience. So we can find an on-the-job training experience where they become an employee of that employer, and we pay for up to half of their wages during their training period to allow that employer to put somebody with that trainee to help them learn how that employer wants them to do the job. So it kind of depends on what the goals of the individual happen to be and what their needs are. If they need training in order to enter that career or that occupation, then we're going to look at how is the best way to provide training for that individual. Maybe it's not college. Maybe it's a vocational school. Maybe it's going to one of the joint technical education districts for their young adult programs. Maybe it's some other kind of training program. So we have to determine what are the needs of the individual based on their disability, what are their career goals, and then map in our plan for employment, map that out so they know what their steps are and what their services are that are going to help them reach that goal of employment at the end.
So it sounds like services are very individualized, but
Yes.
it also sounds very exciting that you really put the client's interest, what they would like to do, their goals first, and try to help them achieve that with support. So thank you for sharing that for our families.
Yes.
So if a client, needed assistive technology to be able to access their job or career, can vocational rehab help with that?
Indeed. That is a service that we provide. We would do an assessment first with one of our occupational therapists that has a contract with us to provide that assessment service. And that occupational therapist would help determine what the needs are for that client so they can either be successful in preparing for employment or so they can be successful on the job. And then we would provide both the technology and the training to use the technology so that that person could be successful on the job.
Wonderful. What are some examples of technology that you guys might help with?
Well, there was a client that I had in the past who was a young man who had started working in a warehouse and had the opportunity to move into the position of a delivery truck driver. And he would have to go not just all over the valley, but he would have to deliver goods over 3 or 4 different states. Well, because of his learning disabilities, this young man was not able to read maps. And this was easily 15 years ago when we didn't have Google Maps,
right,
or the map feature on our cell phones. We had to rely on, at that time, there was the Garmin technology that had that, I forgot what it's called, but it was the device that you used, that you plugged in your destination and it would tell you how to get there. So I provided that technology for him because his employer refused to do so. And he was able to then keep the job that they wanted him to do. So that's kind of a very simple example. Now it may just be teaching them how to use the maps feature on their cell phone, or teaching them how to use some other app on their cell phone, because these things are little walking computers for us. And
so true.
There's so much technology in those cell phones that can be used to help an individual with their employment.
Very true. Thank you. And this kind of falls along the same lines. So if an individual needed certain accommodations because of their disability to work, does your agency, work with the employer and make sure those accommodations are met?
If the individual asks us to, if they have outed themselves to their employers and said, yes, I am a person with a disability and I can do the essential functions of my job, but I will need XYZ in order to do that. VR can definitely help them with approaching their employer and helping them figure out with the employer what's going to be a reasonable accommodation for that individual and the tasks that they need to do. And I must say that the Job Accommodation Network is everyone's best friend, because they provide a fabulous service for an employee but for an employer as well. And it is accessible to anyone who has a computer and can go online or get their telephone number and give them a call. They will work with you one-on-one if that's what you need to help you with accommodations.
And just to clarify, it was called the Job Accommodation Network?
The Job Accommodation Network. And it's www.askjan.org, I believe.
Thank you. We'll go ahead and put that in the chat for families. That sounds like a really valuable resource. A question that came to mind that I didn't put on the list, but I thought I should ask you because we hear it a lot from families. So for individuals that are adults with disabilities, to initiate vocational rehab support, do they have to do that if they're under guardianship? Can their guardian help with that? Does that play into anything as far as if they're under guardianship or not?
If the individual is of the age of majority but under guardianship, it is their guardian that needs to be involved in their case. Even though the individual might initiate the referral, their guardian would need to be involved in the case and would be the one that would also have to sign all of the documents.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask that because we get asked that a lot from parents. So this is another question actually that we've gotten quite frequently at Raising Special Kids.
Okay.
Can vocational rehabilitation assist with transportation if the individual needs to get to work?
So transportation is a service that is based on the economic need of the individual. We have a chart that has the federal poverty level percentages and then the family size, and it, it changes every year on October 1st. But if the individual needs a service that is conditioned on that economic status, the economic need, then they have to meet that standard on the chart, that income standard. But there's always a but, right?
Right.
If the individual receives Social Security benefits, either SSI or SSDI, they are deemed to be automatically eligible for those services based on economic need, if they're needed. So transportation is one of those tricky ones. We can provide transportation, I believe, to get to a service such as an assessment that we're providing. But if the individual doesn't meet economic need, we can't provide that service to get to work. And as far as you meet economic need, you qualify for the transportation service to help you get to work, we're going to be working with that individual to identify, okay, we can support you in your transportation to get to work for a short period of time, but not on an ongoing basis. You need to figure out how you're going to get to work for the long term, because that's part of going to work.
Sure, independence and cultivating those skills. Thank you. I'm assuming if families have additional questions, they can talk to their, or families or adults with disabilities can talk to their counselor and they can help with that.
Yes.
Thank you. And for families listening in, we did put the links to our Arizona Vocational Rehabilitation Program in the chat, and also that pre-employment transition process for high school students. So you can check those out. And then again, of course, please call Raising Special Kids for your individual needs and we'll help you. So moving on, you touched on this a little bit, Betty, but if an individual wants to pursue something that requires a trade, like you mentioned, auto mechanics, or they want to be a medical assistant or what have you, does vocational rehab help with the costs for that program and training?
Yes. We will help the individual research their vocational goal to make sure that it's a good match for their skills and abilities. And we also look at something called labor market, which has to do with how many job openings are projected over a specific time period to tell us what the competition for that specific occupation might be. Because we want to make sure that there are sufficient job openings in the state or in the area that the individual lives in, that individual, as someone new coming into that occupation, could conceivably get one of those openings. So there are some different factors that go into helping an individual choose a job goal. We also look at how might that job goal, that occupation, impact the individual's disability. So if the individual, say, has severe asthma and they want to work as a carpenter,
Right.
we have to look at what is the impact going to be on that client physically by trying to pursue that kind of employment. And if you know about carpentry, you're out there in the environment and subject to sawdust and perhaps wind and other environmental factors that may not be so friendly to your specific condition. So we also have to look at how might that employment goal impact the individual's disability, because we don't want to cause harm to the individual by preparing them for employment that would not be in their best interest. So there's a lot of factors that go into looking for employment and choosing a career goal. And we are going to help that individual do the research, get some work experience, maybe job shadowing or informational interviewing, so they can get all of the facts about that particular occupation that they need to make an informed decision. Is this going to be a good fit for me?
You know, that's really exciting.
Way too much information?
No, it actually gave me a very clear picture, and especially for our families that are just learning about vocational rehab. You know, I didn't even really consider the, potential, looking at the job market, potential employment in the future, but so valuable because, you want this person to be able to get work and sustain work. And that was such a good thing to bring up for families to consider. So exciting. Thank you for explaining more about this. I'm very excited for our families listening in. So what companies in our state work with vocational rehab, if you don't mind sharing a few, and what are some of the employment opportunities you can think of that individuals have pursued?
Okay, so I know I made a list here.
Well, that's exciting to hear that a lot of companies do, that you had to write a list.
Well, excuse me, all this talking. If a company is a federal contractor, they by law have to employ people with disabilities in 7% of all of the positions within their company. So they can't say, 7% of our employees are going to be janitors. Okay. It has to be company-wide, all of the positions. They can't just choose, one position and say, we're going to have 7% of our people with disabilities doing this here. Right. So any company that has a federal contract, just keep that in mind. Okay. They have to employ persons with disabilities as 7% of their workforce. Some of the companies that were just recently on a employment email that I got included the Pepsi company called Roche, Bayer, another company called Synchrony, and Synchrony does customer service. Okay. They have a call center. Tempe Center for Rehabilitation, who works with people with disabilities. Wonderful. And they employ people as drivers, they employ people as caregivers, as rehabilitation folks, as job coaches. They have a lot of different positions that are available. the state of Arizona, all of the different state agencies within Arizona, all employ people with disabilities. There's a company called CSL Plasma. I don't know if they do blood collection and that kind of plasma, or if it's some other kind of plasma.
Okay.
Honeywell, which is technology company, Mayo Clinic in your medical field, the Renaissance Hotel and Conference Center. They have the Mayo Clinic and the Renaissance Hotel both have programs called Project Search, and that is for individuals with some reasonably significant disabilities. It's the target population is individuals with developmental disabilities, and it's a training program that helps them to learn about jobs within those industries. Luke Air Force Base is also a Project Search site. The University of Arizona Bookstore is a Project Search site. The University Medical Center down in Tucson is also a Project Search site. And there's just gobs and gobs. I know I was trying to come up with all of the names, and there's just too many for me to remember.
Well, it sounds like that's a good problem to have. There's a wide variety of opportunities, and
yes,
and the options are endless. So families, if you have a teen or young adult that would like to pursue a career or job and needs support, please take advantage of vocational rehab. Obviously,
yes,
it's valuable with the job coaching and the prepping, but getting, your loved one into the work field, there's so many supports and services. So this is really exciting for families. Thank you, Betty, for sharing it with us just a little bit today about all the options. So in wrapping up, do you have any advice for teens, young adults, parents listening in that are trying to enter the workforce or help their child enter the workforce? Any wisdom or words of advice you could give parents and families?
Yes, there's 3 words.
Okay.
Do your research.
Okay.
So, but I have more to say.
Okay, good.
So find out all you can about that occupation. There are so many websites that help with that. And if you want, I will send a document to Brittany and Neil so that Raising Special Kids has it. But there are just so many different places that you can go to help you with that career exploration. Talk to people, find people who are doing those jobs and talk to them. Ask them about the good, the bad, and the ugly of that job. You need to know the wonderful parts of any occupation, but you also need to know the not so wonderful parts of every occupation, because it might be a deal breaker. There might be jobs that you think sound glorious, but then when you find out X, Y, or Z, you're going, oh no, not me, not that. So do those job shadowing, the informational interviewing, go to job fairs just to meet employers, because you never know what kind of positions are available if you only think of, say, Macayo's as a restaurant and you don't want to be a cook or a waiter. Well, they're a big restaurant and they have CPAs, certified public accountants. They have distributional logistics because they got to get product from one restaurant to another, or from a distribution center to their restaurant. They have people that do all kinds of stuff. They have marketing people. It's just like, you got to think beyond what you might think Honeywell does, or you might think a restaurant does, and think about all the variety of employment opportunities within that company, beyond what you think of when you associate that with your ideas with that company. Labor market research, again, that is so huge. A lot of young people are really interested in web development and video game stuff, and you really need to look at the labor market for those to help you understand if you need to maybe broaden your scope, maybe widen out what you want to do so that there's more opportunities for job openings. Think about, is this maybe a job that is done by somebody who has a lot of training and a very varied work experience? Maybe they need to have a lot of experience in the industry before they can do this one little thing. So do your research. And there's so many ways to get help with that. And don't be afraid to ask questions, pick brains, network. That's really important. The bigger your network, the better off you are. I think that's, oh, and parents, help your children learn the expectations of work. Help them by assigning them chores, giving them things that they need to do, and have expectations as to how you want that done. Encourage them to volunteer, because volunteering is a great way to get that work exposure, to learn about things that you like to do, but also to learn about things you don't like to do, because that's just as important. And the more transferable skills an individual develops, the better chance they have of finding a job that's going to be satisfying to them. So as your children approach their senior years of high school, they have developed a lot of skills. They might not know what skills they've developed, but believe me, they've learned a lot about maybe paying attention, about following directions, about using a computer, about minding their own business. There's a lot of skills that they've learned. And the soft skills, employers say, are what will help an employee keep a job, or if they lack those soft skills, what will get them fired within moments. So focus on those soft skills, those hygiene issues, just the attitude, communication skills. All of those things are so important when it comes to working. And just think about your own jobs, and what's going to be acceptable behavior in your own workplace, and what would be unacceptable behavior in your workplace, and kind of help your children understand those things.
Thank you, Betty. Such valuable advice. So many good tips for parents and families. We're so grateful for your time and your expertise, and clearly your passion for helping teens and young adults in our state find employment. We really appreciate your time. So thank you for being here with us today.
You're welcome. It was such a pleasure to be here. And I hope all of your children become wage earners.
I'm sure the parents listening would agree. Thank you. Thank you for everyone listening in. We're grateful. We hope you learned so much from this training today. I know I did. If you have individual questions, or you'd like to contact Raising Special Kids and have our family support team call you, we would love to help. We put our information in the comments. We also can help connect you with Betty or your transition specialist to help you get your child involved with vocational rehab. So please utilize us, and we'd be glad to support you. As we wrap up, as a reminder, Summer School for Parents is tomorrow. It's not too late to register. We'd love to have you. And next time, actually, we'll be back in a couple of weeks announcing our Raising Special Kids in-person services reopening plan. So we are all very excited that come July, mid-July, we're going to be starting to open back up to the public, and we've missed all of you and are excited for that too. So thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.